Tell me when we're live, we'll go.
We're live.
All right. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys. We're here for Classic Car Restoration Club Live, and appreciate everybody coming out to join me. And Gary. Gary here is, he's a metal fabricator, upholsterer, classic car restorer. He's got a lot of work for a number of shops, and currently working at Straight Line Customs in Burnsville. So if you got any car restoration questions, you can direct them to me or Gary. We'll do our best to answer them all. Also, when you're asking questions, there's a box down below here, right down below the screen, kind of a big, box with a tan header, and that's where you should type in your questions. There's also a little green chat button that's off to the side somewhere. That's usually to chat with a member services people about, maybe you've got a bill or maybe there's something you want to know about other than what we're talking about here. That's what that chat button is for. Otherwise, yes, type in the questions down below and we'll get to them. Feel free to, at any time, if you got a question about anything we're talking about, or, even if you wanted to reply to a question somebody else asked, we can open up a little bit of a dialogue back and forth. Also down below here, below the chat box, there's a little banner for the 66 tips download. And that's what it is, a compilation of 66 tips from fellow car enthusiasts that I put together, some helpful hints and tips to help you restore your classic car. I guarantee you're going to find one or two things. You might find a dozen. You might find 66 useful tips in this batch. So go ahead, just download that. It's free. I put a fair amount of effort in, pulling that all together. So appreciate it. If you download that, then you guys get some more information for you. With that, let's get started. Our first question comes from a guest, and he has, what is the best way to free up a stuck engine on a Volkswagen thing? And, those are unique cars. They've kind of got sort of a cult-like following that really enjoy the things. Number one thing is in freeing up a stuck engine is, did it used to run kind of thing? Is it stuck because it just sat for a period of time, or did it have some sort of issue where the engine ran out of oil or whatever, and the bearing seized or the piston seized or some other means? If the engine has hope of turning over, and that the only reason that the car was parked and just sat for a long time, then there's hope. Otherwise, the best, if it seized up because it ran out of oil and everything else, the engine's going to have to just come completely apart in order to do anything with it. One of the things I like to put in is the old 50-50 solution. Usually when they're just stuck from just sitting, it's the rings that are stuck in the cylinder walls, because whenever any engine sits, not all the valves are closed, so you can still get moisture into the cylinders, just from the air. And that you tend to get some oxidation or some rust buildup inside the cylinders if they've been sitting for a long time. And the best thing to do is just to, pull the spark plugs, get some, like I said, automatic transmission fluid and acetone, 50-50 mix. Some guys, like to use, like the Marvel mystery oils. And I've never had much luck with WD-40 is a good, it's mainly for water displacement. It's not necessarily a penetrating oil, but there's a number of penetrating oils.
Right. WD-40 works great for, fogging the cylinders if you're going to park it for a long period of time. But with the Volkswagen, it's a flat 4, so that might had a couple challenges in trying to fill the cylinders up with ATF to try to free it up. I'm not exactly positive of the location of the spark plugs on those, but you can always retrofit, a funnel that'll fit tightly into the spark plug hole and fill it up that way, and then just screw the spark plug back in, just hold the oil in so it's just not all leaking out on your floor.
So that's the challenge, especially on with an opposing cylinder engine like that, you've got the issues of dealing with, a flat cylinder. So it's not like a V8 where you can sit and fill them up. But, if you take some time and you're going to get some oil in there and it usually comes down to fogging it, getting it in there, making sure, and then let it sit for a while. And you're gonna be turning this thing over on the crankshaft. You're not gonna start it with a starter right away if it's stuck. It's best to get out there with.
Always be sure to pull the spark plugs back out.
Yeah, because you got a bunch of fluid in there, you don't want to try to compress that try to turn it over with the spark plugs in it, because there's no chance you're going to be able to compress any kind of penetrating oil, and then you run the risk of maybe possibly doing other damage. So, let it soak for a bit, pull the spark plugs, give it a shot. I've had, I know a number of guys who've let, engines sit for, a month, where they kept going back and lubricating them over the course of a month before they finally, would get them to free up. And the thing is, if you know it's going to turn over, take your time, your money ahead by, taking, letting the penetrating oils and stuff like that do their job. Yes, there is hope. His next question was, is there hope? Yes, there is hope. We got a question coming in from Jerry on Facebook. He asks, he has a 1966 Lincoln with suicide doors. Those are great cars. And it's in rough shape. Well, it's a pretty old car. It has a 462 engine. Will a 460 swap straight out, or is it better to rebuild the 462? You got me on that. The Lincoln 462 and the 460. I'm not sure if that's the same block. Maybe maybe somebody listening can help me out. I don't think it's the same block, but I don't know that. It might very well be. So if we've got any viewers that are listening, feel free to help me answer that one. Let's see, Jerry Molnar, he writes, I have replaced a car floor on a Carmen Ghia convertible. What is your advice regarding Dynamat in relation to future rust? Want underlay? What underlay would you then add? Are there options for materials that are not absorbent? Well, the Dynamat isn't absorbent. That's like,
it's like a butyl rubber.
It's a butyl rubber attached to a foil backing. The foil backing just allows you to actually install it. If you've never installed Dynamat before, it's like laying in a coat of tar. and it kind of like has a tendency to ooze out around the seams and everything else. It does a really good job, and actually it will help seal things up. If you do have any like drill holes or spot little holes, over time you'll go underneath your car and you'll find you have little icicles of this butyl rubber, so it kind of stays a little soft for a while.
Butyl rubber remains pliable years and years after.
So it's not going to go away. Is there alternatives to using
spraying style like lizard skin?
Lizard skin would be a good choice. Because basically what you're doing, it's going to be a heat guard. Dynamat and the products like that, like the Hush mats, do two things. They stop heat and they stop noise. So it's a good thing to have. You really notice the difference once it's in. There's a huge difference. I've driven cars where there's no insulation anywhere, and it can be like driving a hot tin can down the street. Uh, and I've driven cars where everything's well insulated, the Dynamat all the way around, plus the Dyna liner and some of the foam sound barriers makes all the difference in the world. You would be surprised at the difference.
Oh yeah, and especially just transfer of heat. So like dynamitting your firewall and your floor pan, so the exhaust heat isn't resonating up through the floor pans and into the passenger compartment on a hot day. Um, it works beautiful for uh, isolating that heat as well as on roofs and stuff. You got a black car that's sitting out in the sun out at the car show. Yes, you're gonna be cooking when you get back in and fire it up, and especially if you don't have AC. Dynamat does that. Do a good job of isolating and keeping the heat from entering the passenger compartment as well.
Yeah, so as far as I wouldn't be concerned about Dynamat trapping in moisture or anything because that's not going to happen. It could be possible that, on a convertible that you would get rained on or whatever, and that there might be voids that would fill up with water, in which case, I wouldn't shy away from using the Dynamat. Although, there are other products like the lizard skins and some of those that not only give you a sound, but a thermal barrier. And, it will get into every nook and cranny and crevice because it's actually a sprayable form. So you can actually spray it into all those areas into your car. And if for whatever reason you got water or anything inside your car, it's not going to eliminate it. But it's not going to allow it to be a pocket or something where it might hold it.
Right. Product like the lizard skin, if you do have water that enters in, let's say you got a convertible that accidentally got wet out in the rain, your floor pans aren't going to be wet. It's going to be the lizard skin and your carpet and your padding that are going to be wet.
Great. Hope that helps, Jerry. Thanks for the question. If you got any more questions on here, we just feel free to type those in. We've also got a few questions that have been submitted via email ahead of time, so we'll take a look at some of those as well. Go ahead, Gary. What's the first one we got here?
All right. Hello there. Just wondering if you guys could help me. I'm trying to find a full and complete quarter panel for a 74 El Camino. I've only been able to find partial ones. Please, any help would be greatly appreciated. Mike.
Okay. And really, that falls into the years of the A bodies that aren't completely
being reproduced at this point. So, a 74, that just falls right outside of it. But, as far as like passenger cars and stuff that have similar quarter panels, or how much of the quarter panel do you actually need? Like the wheelhouse lip and probably down low on the quarters, and then towards the rocker panels, it's not uncommon to patch it. In some cases, you could take the original quarter panel off complete and then grab the reproduction and just seam it together. You can get in hammer and dolly and everything you need to, and then put the whole thing on as a replacement quarter panel if you don't have the availability of stuff like convertibles, pickups, or El Caminos in that case. There isn't always the option to have a full replacement panel, but there are a lot of choices as long as you're ready to do a little cutting and welding to make it work for your situation.
And actually, because this one came in ahead of time, we've got, we did a little bit of looking online, and, there are always going to be those cases where you're not going to find anything to fit. If you're building, 52 Plymouth or something like that. They're parts that you're not going to find. So sometimes you got to salvage them off other cars, find a donor car. It's not uncommon for guys to build cars and find donor cars. One of the places I know, one of my first places I usually look is like car-part.com. And basically, it's a listing service for salvage yards across the country. And, we did a quick search for 74 El Caminos, and it came up with tons of, and when it comes to looking for sheet metal parts, it's always best looking to the Southwest, because you can go to Arizona and find, sure, the paint is maybe baked off of it, but, you find a whole box on a El Camino that's in beautiful shape, other than it needs, fresh paint on it. And so you can find those parts. I don't suggest, if you need plastic parts or
you'd want to pick up interior parts, in the north.
You go to the northern tier states to find all the soft interior parts and pot metal parts and stuff like that, and then you go down to the south and you get the
sheet metal,
metal that's been in relatively dry, hot climates where
areas where they don't use salt, which we have up here.
So that, so we did find, we were able to find actually rust-free beds on, 74 El Caminos. Yeah, it would be some work. You'd have to contact the yard, you might need to even rent a trailer and, go cut one off or have them cut one off somewhere. It's not a big deal, it's salvage yards cut quarter panels off vehicles all the time, Usually when I go in, it's like they'll hand me a can of spray paint and say, okay, mark it where you want to cut it. And you just kind of, quick, give it a quick deal. And then the guy in the yard, gets out and either saws it or gas axes it, or a lot of times they'll use like, body chisels and stuff to cut a lot of that apart. But yeah, it's not a big deal. Make sure that, when you if you mark it out like that, that you mark it out away from the part you really need. So you
take a little extra.
You can, when you do get home, you can drill and separate the panels and actually do it in a nice time where you've got like time to actually dig into it. Okay, Tom has a question here. He's got a 1957 Bel Air. It's in the body shop. It has a 327 from a Corvette. Any suggestions to do to the engine before putting it back together? It was running fine before I took it out. If you don't want to go into a full rebuild, Tom, small block Chevys are known for valve guide seals going out. You might want to, it wouldn't be a bad idea to freshen up your head, pull the heads and freshen those up. As long as you got the heads off, you'll be able to go in and inspect the cylinder bores, make sure everything's fine in there. There's nothing worse than getting it all back together and ready to go, and then every time with small block Chevys, especially when you fire them up and they, you get a blue cloud out the tailpipe. So my suggestion would be, as long as you got it all apart, it's in the body shop, freshen up the heads, check out the lower end.
I'd say go after all the gaskets, your oil pan gasket, your any little thing to, give yourself a little insurance policy so you're not trying to struggle to, get to, things you can easily get to right now.
Or even things like rear main seal, there's nothing worse than having a car all back together, all painted, all done up really nice, and all of a sudden you realize your rear main seal is leaked, because it's for most cars it's easier just to pull the engine and do the rear mains on the stand. You can do them in the car, but it can be a real pain. So as long as you've got the car all apart, freshen up the seals and stuff on your engine. I would go in, maybe replace the valve seals, and you should be fine. Jerry, are there recommendations for a carpet underlay that are not water absorbent? Something that could be used between Dynamat and the carpet and be less likely to absorb and hold moisture. Yeah, I would. I would think that jute would hold water like a sponge. I agree. The Dynamat makes this product called Dynaliner that is a closed cell foam. It's designed not to be
Wick
not.
moisture.
It's not designed not to be like a sponge. And in my 35 Chev, I used that, but that's a closed car. Uh, but that's the big advantage of the Dynaliner product is it's a closed cell foam, so it won't suck up moisture like a sponge. And
Don't be afraid to venture outside away from cars. If you don't like the idea of the Dynaliner, it can be a little bit pricey.
yeah,
Petting for boats, marina stuff, all of that stuff you can be cut and used in cars as well.
yeah, that's
And
true.
all that stuff is designed to be out in the elements constantly. So that's going to be closed cell foam as well.
And most well, here in Minnesota, every automotive upholstery place also does boat upholstery. Um, so, at a lot of automotive upholstery supply houses and most upholstery supply houses also carry line for boats and all this stuff for boats that close cell foams and stuff like that. And yeah, I would think that would be a better alternative to a jute, the traditional jute batting that, while that jute works great for, insulation and sound control, I would see that as potential to hold a ton of moisture too.
Yep. If you got a convertible or a leaky convertible top or
Okay, Marty Fisher writes, car has been sitting for 10 years, 1983 CJ8, got inline 6 4.2. How do you pump up the hydraulic lifters so that the push rods are tight instead of loose before starting? Um, if you can, that it just pressurizing the oil system isn't necessarily always going to pump up the lifters. Um, you can try that, depending on the engine. Uh, I know like with small block Chevys, you can, basically take a drill down the distributor hole and get, fluid into the system, but that doesn't normally pump up the lifters because the engine itself isn't turning. What I normally do is I just disconnect the coil wire on my engine and just, after I know I've got oil in the system, I just I crank it over with the starter. Let the engine turn and get oil coming. I can watch my oil pressure and oil pressure gauge. I know on the 57 when we recently did that, we pulled the coil wire and we just cranked it, and the oil pressure came up, and you could hear but long before it actually has to fire, because the engine starter is going to move everything at a much slower speed, and you're going to get those lifters to actually function where they're actually moving oil and getting oil into them through the oil passages. uh, so that would be my recommendation, is just, get your engine full of oil, disconnect your coil wire so you're not going to actually start it. You're just going to be turning it over, at whatever speed that your starter will turn it, which is pretty low, and you're not going to risk really damaging anything. So that would be a good way to go. If you wanted just a little bit more assurance, you could always pull your plugs, so you got no compression as well, and you're just basically, there's no wear on the engine at that point, no load on the engine. So you could crank your engine with no load on it, and no chance of it starting with the coil wire off, and then you should be able to get some oil into the lifters.
Always be sure to put some fresh oil in there. Don't just try cranking it over with
Old oil.
old oil.
Yeah, oil does go bad just from sitting. So yeah, you want to make sure if it's been sitting that long, first thing you want to do is change all the fluids, and that not only oil but antifreeze and brake fluid and uh, any fluids in your car. They break down over time. So it's a good idea to, before you start pumping stuff through the system, make sure you're pumping fresh, clean oil into the system, or, and you have, fresh antifreeze in it as well. Okay, Brown writes, how much metal debris or sludge should be in the oil filter or waste oil after the oil change after a rebuild? Oh, after a rebuild, how much? After assuming that you're changing the oil, well, you'd probably do your initial oil change. I know everybody likes to say modern oils, they can go forever, but I'm still old school in my thinking, because not only does, modern synthetic oils do last longer, they don't break down as fast, they still get dirty. And I normally don't break a motor in with synthetic oil. I use traditional oils when I'm doing a motor break-in, because I think it helps the ring seat quicker, and it helps everything kind of get seated better. Um, but how much sludge you should have on a brand new rebuild? You should not have any metal debris.
If it's looking metallic when it comes out, you got a problem.
There's something is wrong.
Metal on
Uh,
metal. That's what's causing it.
there should not be significant wear on a brand new rebuild. You've got stuff that's seating and everything else, but that's not significant. It's not nothing you're going to notice. And so if I had noticeable noticeable metal and debris or sludge in my oil, uh, initially after a rebuild, I would suspect something would be wrong. And but yeah, it's your oil. Usually when I normally do my first engine oil change. I used to do it at 500 miles years ago. Now I do it at 1,000. Um, I've never, in any of the engines that I've had rebuild, never noticed any significant metal or sludge or anything in them at any time, and I don't think you should. Um, if your engine rebuilder is telling you that he is, you best to talk to get another person to take a look, because it's not correct. Okay, Mark writes, hello, I have a 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix that is not running 3 or 4 years. It has a bad cam, and it's time to resurrect the car. Well, good for you, Mark. I'm wondering, what is the first 2 or 3 steps should I be to assess the motor? If you know it has a bad cam, if running, it has 3 4. It has a bad
If the
cam, and
if the cam is snapped in half, don't do
yeah,
anything besides yank it out.
yeah. If you know it has a bad cam, you know, there's no sense in even trying to do anything other than initiate starting to pull the motor out, or I just had this conversation with a buddy of mine too, where in some cars you can pull, it depends on the car. You're gonna have to pull a push rods and pull the lifters, and you're going to need to be able to, can you pull the cam without taking the engine out of the car? Sometimes. It depends on the car. In most cases, it's easier just to pull the whole works out and do it on the stand. Can a cam be replaced in the car? Yes, a cam can be replaced in the car as long as you need a straight line from the end of that camshaft till it gets completely out. Usually that means you need to remove the grill, the radiator. I've seen cases where you need to remove the core support, and
You're removing the core support. That means you're taking the fenders off. You're taking the fenders off. You're taking the hood off. So
it might be, it depends on the. I'm gonna stick with it. Depends on the car. In most cases, it's easier to just jerk the motor out of the engine bay, and then you can, take care of all. It's easier to do when it's on an engine stand than it is in the car. But some cars, you can pull the engine. All you need to do is pull the grill and the radiator, and you could have room to slide it straight out. Like I said, you're going to have to take valve covers off. You're going to have to, pull all the push rods and pull the lifters so you can actually slide the camshaft out. Bottom line, if you know it's got a bad cam, it needs a new cam. Depending on how the cam went bad, it may or may not, you may need to do some other work inside the engine. So it bodes well to, as long as you're going to resurrect it, spend a few bucks extra and, pop the cylinder heads off, inspect the cylinders. If they look good, you can always, just, drop on a new set of head gaskets and bolt it all back up. So my preference would be in this case is to pull the motor out, take the hood off, pull it, get a cherry picker and undo everything that's holding that motor in and get it out of there so you can actually work on it on a stand. All right. Thank you, Mark. Good question. We've got another question coming in from Robert, who writes, he's got a 56 Ford F100 his dad put together, and since he passed away, I'm having trouble lining up the hood. Have had new hinges put in it, but one corner seems to not come flush with the passenger corner. Am I missing something? Is there with the position of the cab or fenders? Please help, Robert. You've got a lot of experience with the F100s.
yeah, unfortunately, the bad news is it's the hinges. The design of the hinges originally wasn't, to what new car manufacturer standards would be, where it opens and closes perfectly every time. The only thing you could do is there's a hood bumper setup that snaps into the fenders, but that's not a guarantee that it's going to close right every time. And the truck I owned, I'd close the hood and then I'd walk around to the corner and push the one down. How many times I tried readjusting it, it just, the design of the hinge setup was never, perfect. So.
And that, it's something that, like, the F1, the early F100 owners all know about, kind of thing. And they call, what do they call it? The hood dance or whatever. And where you basically close your hood and then commence to walk around your car several times, pushing on one side and the other and kind of even it out. It's not uncommon. It would be, sometimes, I'm sure somebody's gotten lucky before and got one that just closes perfectly.
I haven't met them yet, but the only other alternative is to, retrofit either another set of hinges or an aftermarket kit to go ahead and just eliminate those factory hinges that don't work as well as they should. I know there's the forward tilt hoods that a lot of guys seem to gravitate towards because the back edges of the hoods are so close to the fenders when they come closing down that they're always worried about tearing paint. That kit eliminates all that problem, but then your hood also tilts forward. If you want to take a little ingenuity to it and, craft a set of hinges from, a 69 Camaro and do a couple modifications to the firewall to make those work, that's always an option.
Yeah, those early F-100s, there's more ways that the hoods open and close on those than you can imagine. I know a lot of guys have messed with those over the years, and okay. Next, we have a member sending in a question. We're working under the hood of a car. Is it recommended to disconnect the negative battery cable? Why? It seems more logical to remove the positive cable because that removes the power from the circuit altogether, while disconnecting the negative only interrupts the circuit. Well, the whole thing is a circuit. It's normally your body and your chassis are all negative ground on most cars until you get back a few years, and then some different cars they have positive ground. But it doesn't really matter. It's just a circuit. You're completing a loop, and the reason they say to disconnect the negative is when you're swinging that wrench on that battery cable, if that wrench hits anything, the rest of the body is also grounded, so that's negative as well. So it won't arc if you accidentally hit the inner fender or hit the battery hold down or anything else. That's the number one reason why they always say negative cable. Will it break the circuit if you remove the positive cable? Yes. Either one will do the same job. They'll interrupt the circuit. The biggest difference why most people say disconnect the negative cable is not that one side's hot, one side's ground. It's the fact that everything in your car is grounded, or the negative side. So if your wrench does hit something that's grounded already, nothing's going to happen. You're not going to arc anything or explode anything at that point. What is your opinion on Phytech fuel injection? There is a Facebook site filled with problems. I know a number of guys who run in Phytechs, and I have not had any of them express any problems with them. It's a good system. I personally I don't have any firsthand knowledge of any serious problems. Like it's a fairly new technology for some of them. There's good alternatives out there. There's the Holly has the sniper system, and then Edelbrock has their new fuel injection system too. I kind of really like the Edelbrock system just because it sort of has it doesn't require a in-tank fuel pressure or a fuel pump, high pressure pump. So that one kind of intrigues me. I'll promise. I hear you, Wayne. I'm not just because I haven't done a lot of fuel injected cars lately, or fuel injected converted cars. While I have a lot of friends and I know a lot of people that are running them. I know we did also, you've seen Ross's Chevelle that we've worked on. We've converted that to E80, carbureted E85. He's loving it because he can buy, 110 octane fuel at $1.65 a gallon. but we did also look at, possibly converting that to E85 fuel injected. We kind of dismissed it and kind of went away from it, but it would, I have to think that would be possible. Like I said, I do not have a lot of firsthand experience with the Phytech system. It's something I'll certainly, if you want to, rephrase or bring the question back to our next Q&A, I promise I can find out a lot more about it. I'm surprised there's actually a Facebook site filled with problems. Like any, where you're asking somebody, because it's a consumer-based product where you're asking, a bunch of people that have no experience at all in installing a fuel injection system into their classic cars. It doesn't surprise me that there's people that are having problems because of the nature of it. There's so many different things that can go wrong. That it wouldn't surprise me that people would have problems, but in nowadays,
Well, the same could be said for a lot of kits. Maybe there's just a subtle difference that just makes it not work or compatible for your application. And sometimes it's just a matter of calling the manufacturer. They've probably heard about it or already seen it. That could steer you to a way that, you could get it working correct for your application.
yeah. And, it's not to say that some stuff isn't out on the market that just has problems. It's like in my 35 Chev, I have that old Barry Grant 6-shooter system. And, most guys, I'm sure, pulled that out of the box and bolted it to the top of their Chevy engine and assumed everything was fine. What we did is we bolted it to the top of our engine on dyno with an 8-band analyzer. So we had air fuel mixture sensors on every single cylinder, so we could see exactly what the air fuel ratio was on every single cylinder. And we had the cylinders that were coming in at 22 to 1. We had cylinders that were coming in at 8 to 1. And we just, we spent 2 days on dyno trying to balance it out and to finally get it so, it wouldn't be hurting the motor. But all I can think of is how many people just took that thing out, put it on the engine and, started hurting their motor. We did, when we first put it on dyno, we just had like one sensor on one side so we could see what our air fuel ratios were. And actually they didn't look bad, but it was like an average of 4 cylinders at that point. As soon as we had an 8-band setup on it, suddenly the real downsides of that unit came into play, and how much work we had to do to get it so it was usable. It's probably, it sometimes, not every product, even by known companies out there, is necessarily good. Phytech's been around. They've got sort of a good reputation. So it surprises me that people are having that much trouble. But I will do some more research into it, Wayne, and find out a little bit more about it. John on Facebook asks, need some of the black roof vinyl for my 78 BGT, or is it an MG? No, is it MGBT? And yeah, only enough for the rear quarters. Coarse grain. Can I get it anywhere? It has a Wabatsu roof. Yeah, I'm going to have to do a little bit of research. If any of the members or anybody reading knows of a source, feel free to type that in. I appreciate, we're all here to help each other out at this point. Yeah, I'm not sure. There
is a lot of differences in the Landau top material for different makes and models and manufacturers. Getting a hold of somebody that distributes large quantities of that kind of stuff for, restoration houses and stuff like that. And just sending them, just a little sample of the material you have, and maybe they have something on hand that could match that grain pattern and texture that you need for the rest of your top.
Yeah, and that would, is it maybe out there? Yeah, I would have to do some research to know, but I'm sure somebody out there either has it or we can find a good source for you. Again, here I can type that reply back in later. So if you come back to the discussion panel, we'll do a little research and see if we can find a good source for you. The moving forward, we've got I'm looking to find an original color for my 1971 seat interior seat. How can I find that? The in most of the GM cars, actually most cars in general, there's the serial number plate, and then there's like a trim tag, and the trim tag tells you basically what
What
kind
it
of
was
options
born
were on
with.
the car, and what kind of uh, I know in the case of your 71 Chevelle, it's up on the cowl. Um, Under the hood on the cowl section, there's a separate trim tag plate, and if you're there's certainly a number of sites on the web that can show you exactly how to decode that trim tag plate and tell you exactly what color your interior components were, your paint, and a lot of times they'll tell you if it has I know on some cars it'll tell you what options are on the car
Yeah,
and
if they
stuff
have
like that.
bucket seats or a bench.
And so it's a good resource is to find out, and it can help you when you're restoring your car. These cars have been around forever, and it's not uncommon
For stuff to get swapped out.
stuff to get changed, or the seat, somebody didn't like the interior color, so they changed out the interior color. They went to a junkyard and found one just like it and changed everything over, or they wanted like some option on it. Was a bench seat car and they wanted buckets or whatever. There's a number, it's a good idea to decode your trim tag anyways. And regardless of, I've got 1935 cars that have trim tags. I have 1957 cars that have trim tags. I know that your 71 Chevelle has a trim tag. Uh, you know, write that, take a picture of it, take it to your computer, and just Google search, decode your trim tag, and I assure you, there's like multiple sites out there that will show you exactly what the colors and
If you have
what
this
every
in this, slot, this is going to tell you what it was.
the okay, we're kind of partially through. We're almost done here, but we're gonna down below here, guys. I'm gonna mention it one more time. I've got the 66 tips free download. We kind of pulled together tips from members across the U.S. and some of their favorite ideas for little helpful hints and tips and tricks to fully understand how to make the best of your time in the shop. So make sure you download that. If you have any more questions, feel free to type those in down below. Um, the Well, that one was which compressor do I recommend for a sandblaster? Sandblasting uses a lot of air, So it's best to have a lot of cubic feet per minute. And the more air you have, the better you can sandblast. And, typically I like to be, if I'm sandblasting, I want the air up, around 150 plus as far as pressure. But the big thing you need for sandblasting is cubic feet per minute. And to do an adequate job with most sandblasters, you're going to need at least, 10, 12 cubic feet per minute. I know the one we have in the shop here is like 24 cubic feet per minute. But, this is a case where more is better. The more air you can get, especially, because when you're sandblasting, you're pretty much like opening the air hose and letting it go. So you need a lot of volume of air. So the idea here is to have a lot of volume of air to actually move that sand out and get it. Because the worst thing you can do is have to, get so far and then have to wait for a compressor to build back up again and then wait and, keep doing it over and over again. So, if it's the case where you're not doing a lot of sandblasting, it's the only, I know in our shop, a sandblasting cabinet made us all better car restorers because now we're not putting, we're not just
trying to wire wheel, scale,
and
or
trying,
rust off.
everything we do can be rust free and painted before it goes back onto a car. So yeah, even if you just get a small blasting cabinet, any blasting cabinet is going to make you a better car restorer. And then of course, the bigger cabinets you go, and then the bigger guns you get, the more requirement you will have for air at that point.
Yeah, if you're just using, doing brackets for engine rebuild, you don't need a huge cabinet. There are some companies out there that do sell, fairly reasonable cabinets and stuff like that, where you can get into it fairly cheap, or you can pick up used ones, via Marketplace or Craigslist. But yeah, it does get really tedious if you do have to stop and wait for the compressor to build back up, and right away when you hear the line pressure dropping in the cabinet that's your problem.
Yep. One more tip on blasting though is you really need to control your moisture too. So whether it be the way you run your lines or have some sort of dryer online, or the advantage, especially with blasting, because you're moving a lot of air, it tends to build up moisture in the system, and then that air, the moisture in the actual blasting gun can start to clog up the media and stuff. So you want to make sure you have a fair amount of drying, some way to dry your air so it's not just straight out of the compressor.
Yeah, the water and oil will build up and it'll create a nice cake and it'll plug up your gun and you won't be blasting until you get it unclogged.
Okay, we have a guest who's has a question. He's having trouble finding a vacuum leak on a 390 FE. What is the best way? I think there is I think there is a big leak. If I cover with the secondaries with my hand, I think if I cover the secondaries with my hand, car runs better. So I think it's very lean. Huh. Yeah, probably. There are a few things you can do, to find vacuum leaks. I know for years, what we did a lot of times was just use starter fluid. Starter fluid is flammable, very flammable.
Yeah.
And so, but it's not the safest way to go about it. We've also used propane torch, if you, without the flame lit. Well, because that dissipates so much, it's not going to ignite very far away from it.
When you get near the leak,
But when
you'll
you get
hear
near
it
the leak,
idle
it'll
up.
suck in, and then your engine will suddenly start to accelerate. So the propane torch is a good way to do it because soon as you're this far away from your propane torch, the gas has dissipated enough where it's not going to readily ignite. But so a lot of guys will use propane. The other way you can do is without the engine running, you can do like a smoke test. They may, actually have like smoke bomb kind of things. I know some old timers that do it with cigars where, they'll take off the line coming out for the power brakes, and they'll seal up the top of the carb, and they'll blow smoke into the intake system and see if they have smoke coming out anywhere. And it's a good way to find leaks in weird places. Sometimes I've seen where people had leaks where it was like down on the transmission on the modulator valve where the rubber hose had come off or whatever, and places like that. So if by pressurizing it with smoke, there are some commercially available units to actually inject sort of a
Flammable.
a smoke, it's sort of a dense smoke that's used to inject into an intake system to actually find those kind of things. That's one way you can do it. You can also do it with the propane, the other. But use some care, of course. The thing I like about propane is if it does ignite, then it's just like a little flame. I can hold it away from things, but I've never had a case where it ever ignited. So, and but then smoke testing can reveal it when they're got especially some cars, they have the everything operates off the vacuum. They've got like vacuum heater controls and there's so many different things that are operating off the vacuum that it can be, by smoke testing, you can find things that you wouldn't think about testing in other ways. So the yeah, if you put your hand over your secondaries and it's starting to run better, it sounds like you have a significant leak. So it could very well be just the intake manifold gasket, or
Or just checking the
carb
line,
gasket.
see if something didn't slip off. I've
Yeah.
had that.
Yep. The and the let's see, we have our buddy here's I like the article. I have a minor question on carpet install. Have you had
What is the best way to remove wrinkles from storage prior to installing using a steamer is my best bet? Question mark.
yeah, and anybody who buys a brand new carpet, it comes folded up in a
It's
box,
rolled up
and
in the tiniest box they could get it
and
in.
you're gonna pull it out, and it's gonna be a wrinkly mess.
Yep.
So what do we do?
Roll it out, set it on the floor. You can even set it in the car, but don't try to install it. Just try to let it relax, or even just setting it out in the driveway. If it's a nice sunny day outside, just let the heat warm it up so it can relax if it's a pre-molded carpet. You can also use steam. You're trying to do the same thing, just applying gentle heat to it to get it to relax out of the rolled up shape.
What you don't want to do is use like a heat gun.
Right. Heat gun, all the carpets that are in automobiles are nylon based, and a heat gun will just start melting all of that, and you'll destroy a brand
Yeah.
new carpet in a hurry.
Yeah, heat gun is the quickest way to take a nice new carpet and make it look like trash. So don't use a heat gun. Steam is the best thing to use. You can lay it out. I know when we do them here, we usually lay it out for a week ahead of time because we know it's. don't expect you're going to roll it out and, you know, in an hour it's going to be all wrinkle free
and installed in the car.
and it, you know, and some of that is, you know, just giving it time to relax, and, you know, the best, and it's a case where time solves everything. Well, I see we're at the top of the hour. Wow, time went by quick again, guys. Appreciate everyone coming out today. I can't say it enough. You know, if you have any more questions beyond anything we've answered here today, you know, you can still enter them down below here. We'll come back and check and see if there's anything else we can answer. Thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, until we'll be back again next month for Q&A. If you have anything in the meantime, feel free, like I said, to enter it in there. Don't forget to download that tips thing. And that should do us for tonight. Thank you very much.